So wrapping up today's crossover Thursday, I'm Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, joined by Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles, and Crossover Thursday is, of course, presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Gino, let's get into the things that these teams need to do in order to win, and also called keys to victory. And so for me, the big three for the Atlanta Falcons are, hey, coaches, do your job, and come up with a good game plan. And two, don't get owned in the trenches by this Eagles pass rush that wants to have a resurging game. And then number three, win that turnover battle. And unlike the Green Bay Packers, turn those into touchdowns. And so talking about that number one thing, coaches' jobs to put players in a position to succeed. They did not do that in week one. I could sit here and spend hours and, speculate on all the different ways that I would personally, if I was the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, put those guys in ways to succeed that are different than what the Falcons did in week one. But, while Locked On pays me very well, I don't make quite as much as the Falcons coaching staff does. And so they get paid the big bucks. So they need to come up with better strategies than what somebody like me can come up with on a podcast. But just one suggestion that I'll offer for them for free: bring back a little bit more misdirection in the offense, right? If that's not going to necessarily be play action like it wasn't last week, then you got to compensate with maybe a lot more motion in the offense. NFL players are just too good to just simply line up and just try to beat you. The only team in the state of Georgia that can do that is the University of Georgia, because they play at a much lower level of competition. And frankly, if you try to do that against the Eagles, they're just better than you, and they'll be able to outdo you in that regard. And then that leads us to number two. You got to keep Kirk clean in the pocket. I'm looking for this offensive line, especially on the interior, to see how they match up with Jalen Carter. He scares me from the University of Georgia. I just feel like he's going to wreak havoc all over this game. And again, I hope Vic Fangio, continues to basically have a bug up his butt about playing Bryce Huff. And that's just one less issue that the Falcons have to deal with. But if they do have to deal with Bryce Huff or any of these edge rushers, you pay Charlie Warner to be one of the 5 highest paid blocking tight ends. So ask him to do that job and block, and let Kyle Pitts go out there and be the playmaker in the passing game, rather than having him stuck in there to chip and whatnot to help out these tackles. And then that third one is, we saw the Falcons, a big reason why they lost that week one game was because they were -3 in the turnover margin. Eagles were -2, but they still managed to win. I think some of that was owed to the fact that on those 3 turnovers, Green Bay was only convert those into field goals. And so the Falcons need to be +2, +3 in terms of turnovers this week and turn those into touchdowns. And we'll see if they can do that. But now that I've outlined the 3 keys to victory for the Atlanta Falcons, what do you got for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Number one, I'm going to go off of your number 3. I think it's win the turnover battle. And it's 2 teams that come off of games where they lost the turnover battle. It definitely was a point of emphasis in the film room this week. You'd think the coaches were harping on them for ball security. This is going to be 2 teams that put an emphasis on that going into this game. And for the Philadelphia Eagles, it starts with the leadership of your quarterback in that position. If Jalen can turn the ball over, why can't I turn the ball over? Why do I have to be perfect? Well, Jalen has to set that regard. Win the turnover battle. You can't have 2 turnovers on the first 2 drives of a football game. That's only happened once in the last decade, and that was in 2014 against the Jaguars on opening day. So let that sit in the past and let that be another decade before it happens. Number 2, and the most important thing for number 2, Nick Sirianni, get your team dialed in from the get-go. You're a CEO head coach. You're not calling plays. You're not the defensive coordinator. The reason you came out sloppy was because of the preparation Monday through Saturday. You were not ready to come out there and win that football game in that first half. And it starts with the head coach. And we put a lot of pressure on that guy. But when you can't go down the play call sheet and say, why did you call this play? Why did you call this play? In those areas, when you're in the red zone, when you're in for a minute, when you're starting the football game, you have to be dialed in when it comes to getting the snap off on time, not taking delay of games, not having 12 guys in the huddle. Nick Sirianni, get things going. And number 3, attack primetime Kirk Cousins like you've attacked primetime Kirk Cousins. There's a formula to it, and I was talking to Lou on our show yesterday that he'll be able to keep it close, but then when 1 or 2 things goes awry and you get into that second half when he starts to chase points, much like Jalen Hurts has his Hulk moments, that's when all things go awry for Kirk Cousins and the chaos meter can really start to unfold. I think the Eagles have to make it difficult for him. If he gets the ball out quickly, they have the guys on the island now that can play more press in Quinyon Mitchell and Darius Slay, but it starts with affecting Kirk Cousins up front. Number one, win the turnover battle. Number two, Nick Sirianni. You got to have this team dialed in. And number three, attack primetime Kirk Cousins all night long. And I want to throw an asterisk in there because this is almost like an S tier. If you're in that off or defensive game planning room right now and you're Vic Fangio and you're not looking at Bijan Robinson and pointing and circling this guy and saying, hey, do not let him ruin the game for us, there's something going wrong, because he is the one guy that if you look at, he could change the game in the blink of an eye. And Josh Jacobs in that second half for Green Bay, he started to get going. So if you let a player like that, who the more he gets punched in the mouth, the more he wants to come back and run the football with a little bit more intensity in the pass game, in the run game, you have to take away Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup between Bijan and Saquon. All eyes are going to be glued on probably the two most dynamic, explosive runners in the NFL. And we'll see sort of who shines. Probably both of them will shine at various points, but I do love the potential given the historic weaknesses of the Eagles at that linebacker position. Let's do what so many other teams have done successfully and exploit that and get some one-on-ones with Bijan in the open field with some of those guys and see how they handle that situation.